Harley Davidson, just the latest company to drop diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives following a campaign by an activist.
The Harley Davidson dealer in Southampton has announced that they are closing their doors. But what a ride they've had.
For decades, the Harley Davidson name has been synonymous with American freedom, raw power, and a culture that runs deeper than just riding motorcycles. The mere mention of a Harley dealership brings to mind chrome, thunderous engines, and that uniquely rebellious spirit that makes the brand iconic. Yet, behind the roaring engines and shiny paint, a series of recent bombshell revelations dropped by Harley Davidson dealers have sent shockwaves through the entire motorcycle community. These aren't just minor missteps or simple business tweaks, these are decisions and disclosures that have upended expectations, strained the trust between buyers and dealerships, and forced loyal customers to grapple with unforeseen consequences. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. It started quietly enough, with whispers circulating in online forums, and then escalating to widespread discussions on social media platforms dedicated to Harley enthusiasts. Riders noticed patterns: inflated prices, unexpected fees, abrupt changes in service policies, and limited availability of popular models. But the real bombshell landed when multiple dealers across the country began to unveil new sales practices that blindsided their loyal buyers, introducing a cascade of new realities for everyone involved in the purchase of a Harley. One of the most glaring shocks came in the form of aggressive markups. Harley Davidson motorcycles have always carried a certain price premium due to their brand legacy and the allure of the riding experience. But recently, some dealerships started tacking on extra fees and market adjustments that pushed sticker prices far beyond what buyers had anticipated. Customers who had spent months saving and planning found themselves confronted with price tags that were thousands, sometimes even tens of thousands above the manufacturer's suggested retail price. The reasoning? Limited supply, high demand, and a strategic move to maximize profit amid turbulent economic times. This practice didn't go unnoticed. Buyers, many of whom are longtime Harley devotees, began voicing their frustrations loudly and publicly. The sense of betrayal was palpable. Harley isn't just a product to these riders, it's an identity, a lifestyle. For a brand that has prided itself on community and connection, the impact of seeing trusted dealerships prioritize profit over relationships hit especially hard. But the revelations didn't stop there. Hidden fees began to emerge as another bombshell. The excitement of finalizing a purchase quickly soured for many as they were confronted by a slew of surprise charges. Documentation fees, delivery fees, prep fees, even ambiguous dealer service charges that were difficult to substantiate. Buyers felt ambushed, blindsided by costs that were never discussed up front. Stories began to circulate of individuals arriving at the dealership with a down payment in hand, only to find that the total amount due was far higher than anticipated due to these opaque additional charges. At the same time, many dealers introduced changes to their warranty and service practices, further stoking the flames of discontent. Buyers who thought they were covered by Harley's robust reputation for support discovered that service agreements had been altered, often in ways that made it harder for them to receive maintenance or repair work without paying extra. Some were told that only dealership service motorcycles would remain eligible for full warranty coverage, effectively forcing customers to return for every oil change, tire swap, or mechanical tweak at premium dealership rates. The message was clear. The days of home maintenance or independent mechanic support, once a proud tradition among Harley riders, were now under threat. Meanwhile, the issue of parts availability became an unexpected twist in the narrative. With supply chain disruptions still reverberating from global crises, dealers started rationing parts and accessories. Buyers eager to customize their new rides or keep older models in pristine condition found themselves facing months-long delays for even basic components. Some dealers, recognizing the scarcity, prioritized parts sales to customers who had purchased their bikes directly from that specific dealership, leaving others out in the cold. This new gatekeeping fostered a sense of division among the Harley community, once united, now fractured by the realities of dealership loyalty and access. Perhaps the most stinging development came when some dealerships opted to package bikes with mandatory add-ons and upgrades. No longer could a buyer simply choose a base model and leave with their dream bike. Now, many were forced into purchasing pre-selected packages, bundles of accessories, performance enhancements, and branded merchandise that inflated the final cost. For some, these packages added value. For others, it felt like a manipulative tactic, an erosion of the freedom and personal choice that Harley had always represented. These revelations had an immediate effect on the buyer experience. Enthusiasm at the dealership began to wane, replaced by wariness and skepticism. Where once a handshake deal or a friendly negotiation marked the Harley buying journey, now buyers approached the process like wary consumers, scrutinizing every line of the invoice, pushing back against high-pressure sales tactics, and even walking away from deals that no longer felt fair. The romance of buying a Harley was dimmed, replaced by the cold reality of modern commerce. The cultural fallout was just as profound. Harley Davidson's ethos is built on trust, brotherhood, and a deep connection to the open road. For many riders, their relationship with the local dealership went beyond mere business. It was a social bond, a source of pride and camaraderie. The bombshell revelations fractured this relationship, forcing many to reconsider the value of brand loyalty when faced with what they perceived as outright exploitation. Online communities, once buzzing with ride plans and stories of the open road, filled with threads warning others to avoid certain dealerships, to negotiate hard, to anticipate hidden costs at every turn. The implications stretched beyond just the buying experience. The resale market for Harley Davidson motorcycles also felt the tremors. With new bikes subject to inflated dealership markups and forced accessory packages, used Harley prices began to soar. This seemed like good news for existing owners looking to sell, but it quickly created a new problem: affordability. The next generation of riders, eager to join the Harley community, found themselves priced out of both new and used options. The exclusivity that once elevated the Harley brand now threatened to choke off its future, transforming what was once an aspirational purchase into an unattainable luxury. Dealer bombshells also impacted the brand's carefully cultivated image. For years, Harley Davidson has invested in marketing that emphasizes legacy, family, and the open invitation to all who crave freedom and adventure. But as news of dealership practices spread, this messaging rang increasingly hollow. Riders felt disconnected from the company's narrative, suspecting that the pursuit of short-term profits had supplanted the values that built the Harley legend in the first place. The result was a crisis of identity. Could the brand survive the erosion of its grassroots support, or would it become just another corporation detached from its community and history? The bombshells also set off a wave of innovation and adaptation among buyers themselves. Determined not to be outmaneuvered by dealership tactics, many began to explore alternative paths to ownership. Private sales between individuals surged, with buyers seeking out trusted sources within their own networks rather than relying on dealerships. Some turned to auctions, online marketplaces, or even imported bikes from overseas to avoid the worst of the dealership markups. These workarounds were not without risk, as they often came with their own challenges regarding registration, service, and warranty coverage. But the determination to avoid dealership pitfalls underscored the depth of buyer frustration. A new kind of buyer emerged from the chaos, one who was savvy, skeptical, and fiercely independent. These individuals became experts in deciphering dealership contracts, comparing prices nationwide, and leveraging online communities for tips and advice. The collective knowledge base of Harley riders grew exponentially as stories of both triumph and failure were shared, dissected, and learned from. In this way, the dealership bombshells inadvertently sparked a renaissance of sorts, one that saw riders reclaiming agency over their purchases, refusing to be passive recipients of whatever terms the dealerships dictated. Of course, the tension between dealers and buyers also spilled over into the service bays and parts counters. Some buyers reported being treated differently if they had pushed back against markups or haggled aggressively during their purchase. Others noticed changes in the tone and tenor of dealership staff, who seemed increasingly defensive or curt, as if bracing for confrontation with every new customer. This erosion of goodwill added another layer of complexity to the already strained relationship, making it harder for both sides to see eye to eye. Dealership bombshells also forced the Harley Davidson Corporation itself to navigate treacherous waters. As reports of customer dissatisfaction mounted, the company faced pressure to respond, publicly, privately, and internally. Balancing the interests of its dealer network with the expectations of its customers proved challenging, especially given the fiercely independent nature of both groups. Harley's executive team walked a tightrope, needing to support their dealers while also assuring buyers that the core values of trust, respect, and camaraderie had not been abandoned. Meanwhile, industry watchers observed the unfolding drama with keen interest. The motorcycle world is small, and what happens in the Harley ecosystem often sets the tone for other brands and dealerships. As Harley buyers became more vocal, customers of other motorcycle brands began scrutinizing their own dealer experiences with greater intensity. The bombshells thus rippled outward, challenging the norms of the entire power sports retail industry and inspiring calls for greater transparency, fairness, and customer-centric business models. For Harley dealers themselves, the bombshells represented a gamble. In the short term, the new sales tactics generated revenue and helped some dealerships weather economic uncertainty. But the longer-term implications remain uncertain. Would buyers return, or would the loss of trust prove permanent? Would a new generation of riders be willing to pay inflated prices, or would they seek out other brands, ones with fewer hoops to jump through and a clearer sense of value? The risk of alienating the core customer base was real, and the full consequences of these choices had yet to be seen. The culture shock reached all the way down to the dealership floor. Salespeople who once prided themselves on building lasting relationships with customers now faced increased scrutiny and suspicion. The emotional highs of selling a dream, the wind in your hair, the power beneath you, the sense of belonging were replaced by the grind of justifying prices, defending policies, and explaining away surprise fees. Morale suffered, and staff turnover increased as the dealership environment grew more adversarial and less rewarding. Some dealers, to their credit, sought to differentiate themselves by rejecting the most egregious practices. These outliers became havens for disaffected buyers, places where the old ways still held sway and transparency was valued over quick profits. Stories of positive experiences at these dealerships became rallying cries shared widely among riders hungry for alternatives. The divide between good and bad dealerships became sharper, with reputations built and destroyed in the court of public opinion. The media, always eager for a story that combined beloved brands with controversy, pounced on the unfolding narrative. Investigative reports documented buyer frustrations, analyzed the changing economics of the motorcycle industry, and featured interviews with riders who felt betrayed by their favorite marque. Social media amplified these stories, spreading them to a global audience and inviting commentary from all corners of the motorcycle world. In this maelstrom of opinion and outrage, Harley Davidson found itself at the center of a conversation about loyalty, value, and the future of retail. For buyers, the impact was deeply personal. Many recounted the sense of anticipation they had felt leading up to their purchase, the hours spent dreaming, saving, and planning, only to have that joy undercut by a dealership experience that left them feeling taken advantage of. The act of riding, once a source of escape and empowerment, was now tinged with the memory of a difficult purchase. Some even questioned their long-term commitment to the brand, weighing the cost of staying against the allure of other motorcycles that promised a smoother path to ownership. At the heart of the matter lay a simple question: what is the true price of a Harley Davidson? Not just in dollars and cents, but in trust, community, and the intangible value that comes from being part of something larger than oneself. The dealership bombshells forced buyers to confront this question head-on, reconsidering the meaning of ownership in a world where loyalty is no longer a guarantee of fair treatment or respect. The implications extended beyond individual buyers and dealerships, touching every part of the Harley ecosystem. Custom shops, independent mechanics, parts suppliers, and riding clubs all felt the effects as the traditional rhythms of ownership and maintenance were disrupted. Some businesses thrived amid the chaos, catering to riders seeking alternatives to dealership service and parts. Others struggled as customers became more cautious with their spending, wary of being caught out by unexpected costs. Even the tradition of group rides and rallies was touched by the dealership bombshells. In years past, these gatherings had been joyous celebrations of freedom and fellowship. Now they became forums for venting frustrations, swapping stories of dealership encounters, and strategizing ways to beat the system. The sense of unity remained, but it was now laced with a sharper edge. a resolve to defend the integrity of the Harley community against perceived threats from within. Amid all this upheaval, one thing remained constant: the enduring appeal of the Harley Davidson mystique. Even as buyers bristled at dealership practices, few were willing to abandon the brand entirely. The sound of a Harley on the open road, the feeling of belonging to a storied tradition, the thrill of personal expression, these are not easily replaced. Instead, riders became more determined than ever to protect what they loved, whether by demanding better treatment from dealerships, seeking out independent alternatives, or simply supporting each other through the trials of ownership. The ripples from the dealership bombshells continued to spread, transforming the day-to-day reality for Harley Davidson buyers and fueling conversations far beyond the showroom floor. As the months passed, the aftermath of these dealership practices brought new and unexpected challenges. Yet, even as buyers struggled with the fallout, the narrative around Harley Davidson ownership kept evolving, layered with complexities and unexpected consequences. For many prospective buyers, the Harley Davidson buying experience had always been a rite of passage, an almost mythic event anticipated for years, maybe even decades. The research, the visits to dealerships just to run a hand over the gas tank, the long talks with salespeople and fellow riders, these rituals all formed part of a journey culminating in that unforgettable first ride. Now those dreams collided with a new reality. Every step along the way was fraught with uncertainty and the specter of being outmaneuvered by dealership tactics. One immediate effect was a radical shift in how buyers approached the process. Once, Harley enthusiasts might have entered a dealership in wide-eyed excitement, ready to put their trust in the hands of people who shared their passion. Now, caution and vigilance had become essential tools. Forums and Facebook groups dedicated to Harley Davidson ownership swelled with posts offering advice on how to survive the purchase process, detailing the latest dealer fees and sharing stories about successful negotiations. Buyers educated themselves in ways that would have been unthinkable before, poring over contracts, reading the fine print, and demanding transparency from dealers at every stage. This collective vigilance signaled a new age of consumer empowerment, but it came at the cost of eroding the innocence and joy that had once defined the experience. Dealerships themselves found that the nature of their interactions with customers had changed. Where sales staff had previously been brand ambassadors, helping newcomers find the bike that best suited their riding style, they now found themselves cast as adversaries. Every conversation became a negotiation. Every smile from behind the desk was weighed for its sincerity. Sales tactics grew more aggressive, with managers pushing their teams to secure deals before buyers slipped away to a competitor or simply walked out. The pressure trickled down through the entire organization, souring the atmosphere for both staff and customers. New employees, many of whom joined dealerships because of their love for the Harley Davidson legend, found themselves disillusioned by the realities of modern retail. At the same time, the sudden spike in pricing and the scarcity of new inventory created unforeseen logistical headaches. Buyers who had previously been able to customize their bikes extensively, choosing paint colors, finishes, and accessories to create a ride as unique as their own personality, now faced limitations dictated by what the dealership had in stock. Supply chain disruptions meant long waits for parts or for special orders to arrive, and for those unwilling to pay the markups on pre-assembled packages, choices were further narrowed. The ability to express individuality, so crucial to Harley Davidson culture, felt constrained by commercial necessity. This new environment led to a dramatic uptick in buyers' remorse. Forums and online review sites filled with stories of riders who had paid over the odds for a bike, only to see prices normalize or new inventory arrive weeks after they had committed. Some realized too late that their must-have accessory package added little value, or worse, wasn't even what they wanted in the first place. The experience stung all the more for those who had hoped the purchase would mark a triumph, not a regret. Such stories spread quickly, intensifying the sense of caution among those still searching for their perfect ride. While some Harley Davidson dealerships were swept up in this wave of controversy, others made a conscious decision to chart a different path. A handful of dealers recognized the growing resentment and proactively responded by stripping away hidden fees, maintaining open communication, and sticking closer to the manufacturer's suggested retail prices. For these dealerships, the result was a dramatic surge in loyalty. Word of mouth spread like wildfire, with buyers willing to travel hundreds of miles to do business with someone they felt they could trust. The contrast between honest dealers and those clinging to exploitative practices became even starker, dividing the Harley network into those that would adapt and those that would not. The social dynamics of Harley ownership also began to shift. At rallies and local club meetings, conversations once dominated by talk of the latest rides and customizations now turned toward dealership stories, both good and bad. Riders compared notes, gave recommendations, and formed informal networks to help each other avoid costly mistakes. These new alliances, built on a foundation of shared adversity, paradoxically strengthened the bonds within the Harley community, even as they highlighted the growing rift between buyers and the corporate machine. Meanwhile, independent mechanics and small custom shops found themselves unexpectedly in the spotlight. As dealership service fees climbed and access to official parts became more restrictive, resourceful riders turned to these local businesses for help. The challenge, of course, was that Harley Davidson's increasingly strict warranty requirements often penalized those who sought repairs or maintenance outside the official dealer network. Nevertheless, many were willing to take the risk, convinced that the value of personalized service and fair pricing outweighed the potential downsides. The result was a renewed appreciation for the grassroots hands-on culture that had defined Harley's earliest years, as a new generation of riders discovered the value of building relationships with independent experts. Beyond service, the parts market became its own battleground. With dealership inventories strained and markups high, demand surged for used, aftermarket, or even imported parts. Online communities evolved into virtual swap meets, connecting buyers and sellers across the country. Some riders even organized group buys, leveraging their collective purchasing power to negotiate better deals from third-party suppliers. The ingenuity displayed by these enthusiasts was impressive, but it spoke to a deeper truth. The dealership bombshells had inadvertently spurred a spirit of resourcefulness and self-reliance reminiscent of the brand's earliest days. Within the walls of Harley Davidson Corporate, these developments were being watched with growing concern. The company faced a delicate balancing act, supporting dealers, maintaining profitability, and preserving the integrity of the Harley Davidson experience. As negative stories proliferated and customer sentiment soured, executives scrambled to devise strategies to restore faith. There were renewed calls for standardized pricing, clearer communication of fees, and improved transparency in the sales process. Yet, implementation lagged, and many buyers remained skeptical, having been burned too many times before. Dealership bombshells also had legal and regulatory repercussions. Complaints to state consumer protection agencies increased, and some buyers began exploring class action lawsuits alleging deceptive business practices and false advertising. Lawyers specializing in consumer rights took a growing interest in Harley Davidson, seeing an opportunity to set new precedents in automotive retail law. The specter of litigation forced some dealerships to re-examine their practices, but for others, the risk was simply folded into the cost of doing business. The insurance industry, too, found itself dragged into the fray. As buyers struggled to afford inflated prices and mandatory add-ons, the cost of insuring these high-value, heavily accessorized bikes climbed. Some insurers even began scrutinizing claims more aggressively, wary of the risks associated with bikes that had been modified outside the official dealer network. For riders, this created a new layer of complexity, as they navigated not just the purchase process, but also the challenge of protecting their investment against loss or damage. Beyond these immediate concerns, the dealership bombshells triggered soul-searching within the broader motorcycle industry. Rival manufacturers saw an opening to court disaffected Harley buyers, touting their own transparent pricing, superior customer service, and innovative designs. Brands that had long lived in Harley Davidson's shadow now stepped confidently into the limelight, attracting new customers with promises of a smoother, more straightforward ownership experience. The competitive landscape shifted as Harley faced new threats, not just from within, but from all corners of the motorcycle world. Yet, even as rivals gained ground, the Harley brand retained a magnetic pull. There remained something ineffable about the experience of riding a Harley, something that transcended mere marketing or corporate strategy. For many, it was a connection to history, a sense of participating in a tradition that stretched back more than a century. For others, it was about personal transformation, the act of stepping into a larger-than-life persona every time they swung a leg over the seat. The bombshells may have complicated the path to ownership, but they could not erase the intangible rewards of the ride itself. In response to the dealership crisis, some buyers adopted a wait-and-see approach, delaying purchases in hopes that the storm would pass and prices would stabilize. This patience sometimes paid off, as dealerships, eager to clear inventory, occasionally dropped prices or reintroduced incentives to lure buyers back. For those willing to play the long game, the roller coaster of pricing and policy changes created opportunities, but also demanded a willingness to walk away from deals that felt wrong. Others took matters into their own hands, becoming amateur experts in Harley Davidson history, model variations, and market trends. These passionate individuals became the new voices of authority within the community, publishing guides, writing detailed breakdowns of dealership contracts, and even starting YouTube channels to document their own buying experiences. Their insights empowered other buyers, helping them make more informed decisions and avoid the traps that had ensnared so many before them. As the dealership bombshells reverberated, family dynamics around motorcycle ownership shifted as well. In the past, the purchase of a Harley Davidson had often been a family affair, a proud moment celebrated by spouses, children, and friends. Now, conversations around the dinner table took on a more cautious tone. Partners questioned the wisdom of spending so much on a bike, worried about the impact of hidden fees and long-term depreciation. Some families delayed purchases or sought out older, used models as a more cost-effective way to join the Harley fold. The dealership experience, once an occasion for joy, became a test of patience, planning, and financial discipline. On the financial front, lenders responded to the new dealership environment by tightening requirements and scrutinizing loan applications more carefully. Higher sticker prices, inflated by fees and packages, meant larger loans and more risk for banks and credit unions. As a result, some buyers, especially younger ones with less established credit, found themselves shut out, unable to secure financing for the bike of their dreams. The generational divide grew sharper, as older riders with deeper pockets and better credit enjoyed greater access, while newcomers struggled to find a foothold. Meanwhile, the international Harley Davidson community watched the situation in the United States with a mix of concern and curiosity. In markets abroad, some of the same dealership practices began to appear, though often tempered by local regulations and cultural norms. Riders in Europe, Australia, and Asia debated whether the problems seen in American dealerships would migrate overseas or whether their own buying experiences would remain untouched. This global dimension highlighted the extent to which the Harley-Davidson brand transcends borders and the degree to which its reputation hinges on the integrity of its entire dealer network. Environmental factors added another layer of complexity. With the rise of electric motorcycles and increased scrutiny on emissions, Harley-Davidson had made headlines with its foray into the electric market through models like the Livewire. Yet the same dealership issues, markups, limited inventory, mandatory packages, surfaced around these new bikes as well. Early adopters who had hoped to be part of Harley's next chapter faced the same obstacles as those buying traditional models, fueling frustration and casting a shadow over the company's efforts to reinvent itself for a new generation of riders. In the face of these challenges, the culture of customization, the heart and soul of Harley-Davidson ownership, adapted in innovative ways. Riders began to embrace DIY modifications more than ever, turning to 3D printing, open-source design files, and homegrown fabrication techniques to sidestep dealership restrictions. Online tutorials and video walkthroughs empowered even novice mechanics to tackle jobs once reserved for professionals. The result was a renaissance of creativity, as the constraints imposed by dealerships only fueled a desire to build, tinker, and personalize without limits. Harley-Davidson clubs and riding groups also found new purpose. Where once the focus had been solely on camaraderie and the open road, these organizations now took on a more activist role, advocating for fair treatment of buyers, transparency in sales practices, and accountability from both dealerships and the corporate office. Some clubs established formal channels for resolving disputes, offering mediation services or connecting members with legal experts when problems arose. In this way, the bombshells sparked a new era of collective action, as riders realized the power they wielded when they stood together. The generational divide within the Harley Davidson community deepened. Older riders with memories of a simpler time when dealers were friends and the brand's values seemed unassailable struggled to reconcile the new reality with their nostalgia. Younger buyers, more attuned to the ways of modern commerce and less invested in tradition, were sometimes quicker to adapt, but also less likely to tolerate what they perceived as exploitation. This tension played out in club meetings, online discussions, and even at the rallies that had long defined the social calendar of Harley owners. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Harley dealers dropping bombshells? What consequences do you expect? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.